Okay, we're going to get started. We're having hearings today anyway, so we don't have to have a quorum. I know some people on the way, and we have people online. So I'm going to call this meeting to order of the House Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee. Representative Fraser, could I ask you to lead us in a word of prayer to open the meeting?
A lot of prayer up in here today.
Okay.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for all of your blessings that you have bestowed upon us and every one of our families here today. We ask that you continue to bless our chairman as he do the business of the people here in Georgia. We ask that you bless this meeting and that it be productive for the citizens of Georgia. We ask these blessings in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Representative Fraser. We have a bill we might take action on. Representative Chairman Houston, I think she may be on her way. Representative Thomas, you have a bill that you want to present to us. Is that correct? Okay. Come on up and we'll, right there, the hot seat. Okay. Representative Thomas, you have House Bill 966.
Yes, sir.
If you'll tell us, now we're not going to take any action on this, but I'm going to do this a little different than the others because I want to go ahead and assign this to subcommittee today. But I am going to have you present it and tell us what it's about, what you want to do, and what the bill does. And we do have, I think one's going to take some time. So if you can be concise and brief,
Sure.
but I want you to explain your bill to us.
Sure. Is this on? Yes. Okay. Good afternoon. Are you able to hear me? Okay. Good afternoon. I bring you greetings from the 65th House District. I am Andy Shea Thomas, the author of House Bill 966, and I want to read in the LC number for the record, LC 364953. This bill is entitled Solar Consumer Awareness Act. And I thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to have this hearing today. And I thank you for the committee members that are here. And I can't forget Legislative Council. Thank you for working with me on this bill, Sean Marie. I also have with me Mr. Kevin Grimes, which we collaborated together towards the need of this bill, and it's based on the experiences of Georgia regarding installation of solar panels. And I'll give Mr. Grimes an opportunity to formally introduce himself and give commentary. But before I do that, I wanted to take just a brief moment to talk about a few points as it relates to this bill, and I call it the PNP, which is purpose, need, and protection. So the purpose of this bill is to specifically provide education and awareness to consumers who are at the point of sale of solar unit panels. Also to provide an added measure of education via consumer awareness video presentation, which this bill asks the Public Service Commission to offer to customers who are in consideration of purchasing solar units prior to the purchase of the unit from any solar vendor. The need of this bill stems from multiple accounts of individuals who have purchased solar panels and have not or may never receive a return on their investment based on solar units not being applicable to their home. Now, the protection of this bill provides education that some homes may just not be the best candidates for panels, but the consumer may not be aware of this. And the presentation that's been given from the Public Service Commission would reinforce or bring one's attention to variables of solar panels to aid in helping each customer in making the best choice for their home by explaining some installation techniques, types of solar panels, and how to take in consideration the amount of sun needed, as well as the slope of the roof, which is very important for the consideration of solar panels. So I wanted to touch on a few things that this bill is not doing. This bill is not asking Georgia to give pros and cons on solar. This bill is not asking the Public Service Commission to sway a consumer's decision against solar panels or for panels. This bill bill is not asking customers to take a course on solar panels to become an expert on solar energy. What this bill is actually doing is providing an additional aid of comprehension to customers prior to them making a major final financial investment in respects to their home in the form of solar energy. And just a little brief history about me. I'm all about education and awareness. I have a strong education and awareness initiative that I started in 2019 with the Georgia Environmental Justice Education and Awareness Symposium. And so I'm about the quality of one's life and investments that they have to make. Because Mr. Kevin Grimes has such intel in this industry and is also a treat for me because he's a constituent, I have asked him to help me compose this piece of legislation along with Ledge Council, and if it be your will, I'd like to give him time for commentary.
Tell me his name again.
Mr. Kevin Grimes.
Okay, Mr. Grimes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the sake of being brief, I will tell you one of the biggest misnomers about solar panels that consumers are not aware of. So imagine installing solar panels because you want to have energy, a backup. If the grid goes down, you'd like to still have solar panels so you can have power for your water, if you have a sewer pump, those kind of things. Well, what a lot of consumers do not know is that it can be high noon on the sunniest day, and if the grid goes down, their solar goes down as well. So I want to make sure I share this again. If the grid goes down and you have a fully functioning solar system, it does not work. There's a feature called anti-islanding that prohibits the solar panels from sending power back to the grid. So when the utilities are down and the linesmen and repair people are working on the solar, your system goes down for the safety measure. It's called UL 1741. A lot of people have been sold solar systems, and their primary reason for doing it is an alternative to a gas generator. And they sit there for 8-9 months. They have this solar system that costs a minimum of $18,000. And then the first time there's a storm and power goes down or trees hit a line, their solar goes down and they don't understand why. They're spending 4 to 6 hours researching why their solar isn't working, how come their power is off too. They go outside and look, the sun is shining right on their solar panels. But then they're told by someone, yeah, unless you have a battery with your solar system, which is another $10,000. When the power goes down, even though you have a solar system, your power goes down as well. That happens to a lot of consumers. The sticker price is already $18,000. The vendor does not tell them that because now we're pushing another $28,000 to actually serve the real need for why this person picked solar. That's the biggest one that consumers are not aware of and vendors do not tell them. The two other easy ones are, solar panels installed on the north side of the house is pretty much inefficient. It's ineffective. I see solar panels installed on the north side of houses all the time. Next one, solar panels do not work in high shade areas. There are people in Georgia, fully mature trees, 30-year-old trees. They're sold a solar system, typically in the winter. And what they're told by the vendor is you won't see the real benefit in the summer until the summertime comes. We're going to install the panels, but they're in full shade and they never get the benefit. And unlike lemon laws with cars, nothing like that exists for solars. So these are just 4 basic things that would take a small amount of effort and a small amount of time to educate every consumer on before they buy solar. That way they actually understand what they're getting into and they can make an informed decision. All of these things are not disclosed to a majority. These things aren't customarily disclosed to consumers. What happens is the installer goes out, looks at the roof, and everywhere they can put a panel, they put a panel. So even if they need a 6 kilowatt system, if your roof can support 15 kilowatts, they'll sell you a 15 kilowatt system. Again, that's not the issue. The issue is if it's a shaded area, if it's the north side of the house, those are inefficient. And the typical payback period or break-even period on a solar installation is anywhere from 20 to 25 years. That's if it's done right. So when it's installed on the north side or it's installed in a shaded area, those consumers will never receive, will never hit the break-even point on their solar installation. And I'll defer.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for members of the committee? Any online? Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. First of all, I appreciate you bringing the bill. I think that I know the concept is good. I don't know the specifics of what you have in it. If it's something that has to be looked at, but I remember when we passed the bill, I guess about 6-7 years ago, Representative Dudgeon had for third-party installation. I remember then, as we were concluding that and had to vote, I remember several of us thinking about the consumer issues, and because I know even then that I think before that bill was passed, I remember myself getting a call. I can't remember whether it was an actual call or his voicemail. I can't remember because it's been several years ago, but I remember that I got a call from before the bill was passed, somebody calling and saying that they did that third-party installation and that Georgia had a new law, which we didn't have any new law because we hadn't even passed the thing yet. But even then it was extremely exaggerated, what they would do and how much money that they could save and things like that. So I think that what the idea of what you're doing is good. Now, as far as the actual merits of the bill, I'll leave that up to a subcommittee. I think there's a couple of people who have signed up to speak on this.
Jason Bragg and Don Moreland.
Okay. I'm going to put this in subcommittee. This is a little different than the other bills we've had. However, and then you'll have a chance for testimony in there, but you've come and I don't want to keep you from coming. I don't know who signed up. Who signed up first? Don Moore. Yeah. Oh, yes. Representative Frazier, you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a question. Thank you so much. I just learned in this 6 minutes a whole lot about solar panels. And so my question is to Representative Thomas, how do we plan to get this information out to the consumers? The presentation that was just presented, what is our format to get this information out before I go buy solar panels?
Yes, thank you, Representative. The bill is asking that the Public Service Commission create a presentation video that the consumer would have to sign off on, and the vendor would have to present that presentation video to the Public Service Commission. And a recommendation needs to be made within 30 days. There are some key points in the bill that at minimum needs to be in that presentation, and then if they want to add additional, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, Don, is it Don Moreland? Yes, sir. Come on up. I would ask you to be brief because we're doing this a little different, and they're all going to go to subcommittee, but this one will go to subcommittee where you have a chance to testify before the subcommittee.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay? My name is Don Moreland. I'm here on behalf of the Georgia Solar Energy Association, and I serve as the chair of the policy committee there. And I've been a member of that organization on the board for probably longer than I care to admit. But we are here to acknowledge that there is a big problem in Georgia when it comes to deceptive sales practices and sometimes installations in the state of Georgia. When it comes to solar, it's kind of divided into your deceptive sales practices on the front end, and then installation or contracting and installation on the back end. We do support this bill in its spirit, but not its implementation. And there's some technical things that we can go over in subcommittee, such as it does include, when we talk about solar technology agent, it includes finance companies and installers, and a lot of times they have nothing to do with the representations that are made at the time of sale. But I'm from a real estate background. In a former life, I was a real estate attorney for many years, and that industry, if anybody has refinanced or bought a house anytime soon, then you know that there's a ton of disclosures, and there's something called a CD, a closing disclosure, affidavits, other types of disclosures that are required to be signed. And we feel that that's a path that we should think about for some kind of consumer protection when it comes to solar as well. The AG's office already has written up a piece about solar for your home, and I brought copies of that for all the members here. And my organization has also written up a bunch of consumer protections and actually made a video alerting people to these out-of-state actors who are coming in kind of fly by night. Nobody knows who they are or who owns them. And they're making all these crazy representations, including evoking Georgia Power. Sometimes Georgia Power will pay you to put solar on your house. And that's not true. But we have, at the Georgia Solar Energy Association, we have done everything we can to educate consumers. The AG's office has made a step in that direction. And we just feel like between those types of things up front, pamphlets or brochures, and then a series of disclosures along the lines that of the specifics that were mentioned here that are required to be signed at the point of closing are enough to kind of bookend the whole process from sales all the way to signing the contract and the installation, and offer enough consumer protections for Georgia residents.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I don't see any questions, and you'll have a chance to speak to the subcommittee on it. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Jason, Mr. Bragg.
Long time no see, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'll be very, very brief. I just wanted to thank Representative Thomas for bringing this bill. I think that Jason Bragg represented Georgia's 41 electric membership corporations. I think not a week goes by, I don't think, that I don't have a member reach out to me about, some issue with a solar installation. It's encouraging to see the industry here realizing that there are problems happening in the market. I certainly don't think that our members feel it's everybody, but we are seeing some problems with, sales practices and whatnot. We've even had one that one solar company that came door to door to one of our EMC employees' house and was almost representing themselves as being an employee of the EMC. So it's encouraging to see Representative Thomas taking some steps to address some of the things that we're seeing out in the market right now, and is doubly encouraging to see the solar industry groups come in here looking for ways that they can help self-police themselves and create a better market and better atmosphere for us to do this, because obviously our members are very much in favor of solar. We want to be an education and we want to be educational and a resource for our members when they come to us and they're thinking about installing solar on their roof. And just looking forward to working through the process of the subcommittee with this, and we'll be happy to present more information to you at that time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see any questions. And with that, Representative Thomas, what I'm going to do is assign this to subcommittee. He doesn't know it yet, but Representative Anderson, if you would chair the subcommittee, it will be you chairing it. On the subcommittee will be Robert Dickey, Gloria Frazier, Mamta Han, Brad Thomas, Sheila Nelson, Kennard, Carla Drenner, Vice Chairman Gillette. I think I named them all here. So if you would get together with those folks and set up a meeting with them and look at the merits of the bill and what the, line by line, what the bill does, and look at a real good look at it, considering what she's wanting to do, and also what the challenge or what the goal is, and, what might be if that's the best way to do it. If there's another way, you may be open to look at it, but it is an important issue, and I appreciate you coming with it. I really do. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for coming. Let's see, I want to call upon Chairman Houston. We do have a quorum on this particular bill. We're going to hear her, but we're also going to, if it's the will of the committee, we will take action on this particular bill.
This is the most nonpartisan bill you'll ever hear. I know you heard that. I know you heard that. Nope. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you House Bill. I know what number it is. Let's see. Yeah, tell me, I can't find the bill. I've got it right here. It's a real long bill. I bring you House Bill 966. As many of you probably know, that the Public Service Administration Commission performs pipeline safety inspections for the federal pipeline and hazardous waste. Okay. Okay, well, I don't have a copy of the bill, but it's a very short bill. I thought I had it in here. If y'all had seen my desk, it was after I ran over from the other place. Okay. All right, the Public Service Commission administers the safety inspections for the federal pipeline and hazardous waste. And currently, they do educate the people who do pipeline inspections and people who are doing excavations. They do educate them in calling 811 and 911, but it is not in law. And the federal government, the people in the federal pipeline and hazardous waste are pushing them to codify that excavators have to call if you hit a pipeline and it's a gas or hazardous waste, that you have to call 911. And last year, this bill was in a larger bill we had, an excavation bill. I'm not familiar with the number. And it passed the House, but it did not pass the Senate. So the Public Service Commission is asking for a standalone bill. One reason they're asking for a standalone bill is you probably remember that last year we put some money in the budget to do call before you dig, and we did not have enough call before you dig, and you get points or credits according to the amount of money you get back from the federal government. And the House put in $150,000 to hire 2 more call before dig people. So, but anyway, and we thought we'd get 300,000 back. We got over $500,000 back, and because that raised our credit points. And they're not telling us right now that they're going to do anything with our credit points, but they're telling us that if we don't do it soon, that eventually that we might have some credit points. If we put this in, we'll add more credit points to the amount of money we get back. And it's sort of a common sense bill. I know you think everybody thinks when you hit a gas line, you can call 911. That's the reason I said it was a very nonpartisan bill. And they're asking for a standalone bill because they're scared it might not pass again.
Okay, that's understandable.
So that's the reason they're asking for a standalone bill.
You have a question if you care to take it.
I'll be glad to take
I'm
it.
not sure. That's you?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chairman, so what you're saying is we just need to codify common sense here. It's
Yeah.
a common sense step in the state of Georgia. And if we do that, it can be recognized and get more federal funding because we have more points.
And if
on
you'd
the
like
federal
to, I will
scorecard.
take an amendment for more common sense in the government.
I was going to say that, can we expand that bill?
Okay. Go online. We have a question from Representative Dickey. Do you care to take it?
Yeah,
Thank
it'll
you,
be fine.
He's online here, I believe. There he
Hey.
is. There he is up there.
Oh,
Thank
how you doing?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chairman, I got a couple questions. What is the point in calling 911 if you only strike a pipeline and do no damage? And my second question, is it required to call the pipeline owner? Why would you, is there any requirement to call the owner?
Well, I don't know. It just says that if the excavator has to call 911 upon striking or damaging the line.
I can understand damaging it if you got a damage, something that's causing an issue, but I guess in the course of work, you strike it but do no damage.
Well, I think
I-
line 11 and 12,
Yes.
I think it says to alert emergency services upon striking or damaging. Maybe you might not think you damage it, but it might have a little bitty hole or something in it and gas will just strip it. I don't know. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Another question? Okay. Representative Drenner has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Madam Chair. This is more directed at the chairman. If Chairman Parsons, you know, we had a study committee this summer. Representative Meeks Is this as a result of that committee?
You're addressing it to me. I think,
I think
Representative
this
Meeks is
is a
here, yeah.
result that it was supposed to be in a bill last year and it passed the House. And the people in Washington were asking for it last year and it passed the House and a big bill about excavation, but then it got to the Senate and did not pass. And that's the reason they're asking for it. It's
Okay.
kind of from Commissioner Pridemore.
Representative Drenner, there is that bill, as you know, as a subcommittee worked on that you may have been on it, I don't know, but worked on it during the summer and the fall. And so that a new bill's been introduced, but it still hasn't, I don't even think it's been introduced yet, or hasn't been given it hadn't been read for the first time. But I think what Chairman Penny Houston is saying is that the PSC has, in particular, has advised us to go ahead and do this in case that bill gets held up again. They definitely want this part needs to be done. That's what I know about it. However, if you would go ahead and
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir, you did address that correctly. The PSC wanted to go ahead and get this done in case that bill gets bogged down. It was originally in the bill and was pulled out, but we'll continue to work on that. And Representative Vance Smith's legislation will be dropped tomorrow, first read tomorrow and referred to committee.
But I think one thing the PSC was concerned about, that if the same thing happened in the Senate, we didn't want to be
right.
left again. But
Okay, I
any
don't
further
see any.
questions?
I don't see any further questions or. Okay, we have a motion to do pass. Have a second. Any discussion on the bill? Hearing no discussion. Hearing no discussion. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of House Bill 1307 LC 365094. Indicate, if you're in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by saying no. I don't know, hearing this is passed and we'll move on to,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and
eligible
thank
for
you,
rules.
Sean Marie, for drawing up this delicate bill.
thank you for coming and congratulations. All right, now, Chairman Allen Powell, you want to come and present your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I bring to you today, you should have a substitute to HB 1322 LC 365156S. And I will tell you that the only difference between the substitute and the bill would appear on line 65 and a 2-line change. It just gives a better definition to the Territorial Act. When we go into this, before I get into the guts of this, I want to say what a pleasure it was to listen to Chairman Chokus yesterday. And he was describing one part, just only one part, and that was how we need to get around the fact that our business community in the future, they're going to have a need to be able to resell power for the EV chargers. Now, I'm going to try not to be redundant, because you heard enough yesterday, but I've been looking at this. We've been working on this since the fall of the year. I am close to the retail establishment, having been in the C-store business for the earlier part of my life. And I know the importance of that. Quite frankly, I'm amazed at this transition, because we're fixing to go through probably the next biggest transition in transportation that this country's ever seen. It could even be as earth-shaking as what we've seen with this pandemic, because it's going to change the way of life. As y'all all know, the law of the land that Congress changed a few years ago to try to start remedying the fossil fuel issues was go to electric vehicles. We've got car manufacturers that doing due diligence to get ahead of the curve. They're already talking about completely refitting their factories to go all electric. Quite frankly, I scratch my head in amazement because we're talking about the possibility of a industry that all of this could be for naught, because a lot of it's going to depend on the technology changes that occur. You know, 1 year you talk about 250 miles on a charge, then it's 350. But I will tell you that the American public, in my opinion, that they're not set up in their minds to sit somewhere for 20 or 30 minutes for a charge. And that may all change at one time. You heard Chairman Chokas make reference yesterday to possibly replacement charge cells and all of this. So at some day, this is all going to happen. Whether it happens just with electricity powered vehicles or some other type of motivation and power source, time will only tell. But that being said, what we have to do today is to deal with the issues of the EVs and the EV chargers. I have had a lot of discussions. We've had several meetings, and I'd be remiss if I didn't call out a few folks. I want to give my thanks to our friends at Georgia Power and the Georgia EMCs, the 41 co-ops, MEAG. We've had hours of meetings with these folks, and there was a lot of going into the preparation process. We looked at a lot of different things that needed to be dealt with to make and to get this state prepared for the new EV charging generation. In the process of that, I realized that there was only a few things that we needed to do right now. And as I had explained to them at the time, and that's to draw a roadmap, to draw a blueprint to the electric utilities in the state and to the rest of the state of public policy, so that we would be prepared and move forward, just as much for the benefit of the utility companies as it is for the consumers and for the retail establishments in the state. Currently, the #1 retail establishment for fossil fuels, and that would be your filling stations, your truck stops, your convenience stores that certainly have the properties and they have the businesses. As we see, even though we're at less than 1% EVs right now, that's going to be hastily increased in number in the near future. For that reason, I'm bringing this bill and have constructed this bill as a blueprint, because it's going to be here. And I would hate for us to make the same errors that we made with broadband, that we let it get out of control before we had a blueprint laid out and a pathway to go. Now, that being said, what this bill does, and one thing that we were all in agreement, and Chairman Chokas yesterday, and that was to allow the resale of power by the companies that are going to be selling power and running the EV chargers. Now, our friends at Georgia Power, they've come up with one language, and I'm sure the rest of them. But wherever you've got a lawyer and an ink pen, we're going to accomplish the same thing. It's going to read it 1,000 different ways. And that's what we've done in this bill, a little bit different than Chairman Chokas's bill in that. The second part that I thought was most important, and I spell this out to the utilities at the start of these meetings, and that's that I thought that, and I still believe that that legislators today or in the future will not tolerate a monopoly. They will not tolerate an unfair playing field. And I still maintain that belief. And I think for the benefit of the utilities that they need to also understand that. And for the biggest part, they've agreed that they don't want to be into this, but they'll come back and they'll talk about maybe serving underserved areas and things like that. And I have concerns that may be just we know how utilities are. Listen, they do their due diligence. They've been good business leaders in the state. They want to do what's in their best interest, but they need to, because whether they're co-op owned or whether they're stock held companies, they have an obligation. And in this bill, as you read it, what you will see is in the first section, under chapter 3B, first section, this basically sets the framework. It talks about the framework design for the future, a pathway to go. And it talks about all of these things to provide for the deployment of in the declarations. We implement competitively neutral policies to encourage private sector investment in electric vehicle charging. Implement competitively neutral tariffs, encourage private investment, ownership, stimulate innovation, competition, develop mechanisms and incentives, provide incentives and the such. And then as you move on to section 46, 3B2, there's your definition, your definitions. And I will be the first to claim that you members of the Public Utilities Committee can probably read through that better than I do, because we don't deal with that type of language. I mean, these specific language that deal with the utilities, so their attorneys do. When you look on line 65, this was a change from the original bill and the substitute, and this is a better definition to say that the sale of electricity from privately owned vehicle charging equipment shall be deemed the sale of electric service for resale. And you know, and as members of the committee, y'all understand the importance of a very clear and concise definition, because this keeps from abridging the Territorial Act, something that is a sacred cow to all of these folks. You get into 46B3B4. This sets up that if any of the electric companies, if they want to have chargers or whatever they want to do, well, they can do it, but they have to do it under a separate, unregulated entity. Probably not unlike, I think, Georgia Power does with their street light program, security lights and stuff like that. Basically, it would set forth in this language of this bill that they do so, and they don't use the rate base to do that, is to create a system so that they will have to have a third entity if that's what they wish to do, to be in competition with private business that sells. But it also says that they can't use that rate base to sell below what they are charging to the other people who are competing. So it creates a level playing field. And basically, ladies and gentlemen, that's what this bill does. It's very simple. As you see, it's only 4.5 pages. I will tell you up front, if you ask why on the last page, why we have drawn out the EMCs, then I will tell you that them being a membership co-op, they function different, as does MEAG from Georgia Power. And they have 41 distinct EMCs that are self-regulatory in their own right. And I didn't want to drag them into this, because in the real world, it's been my experience that whatever one of the utility companies do, they all pretty well follow suit with their business model, whether it be the EMCs or whether it be MEAG or Georgia Power. And that being said, I'll be glad to stand for questions. And if I can't answer them, I'm sure there's a plenty of smart folks in here that can.
Questions from the members of the committee? I don't see any questions. So I will ask a couple here if you don't mind.
Please do.
Okay. In your bill, lines 19 through 41 are the findings, the things you said was kind of a blueprint, but they are
Right.
just findings. They're just things that have, that you kind of based the bill upon, at least what you found. Then 46, or actually 42 through 63 definitions, which I don't, somebody had a question. I'll leave that. If somebody wants to ask the question, that's going to be up to them. But you have definitions here. I was going to ask you about the definition for the for a power company provides electric service, and that you've got it in here is only ones regulated by the PSC, so that takes those others out. And you've explained why you want to do that. And then, as you said, 68 through Okay, and you addressed 65 through 66 about electric service resale. You addressed that. 68 through 71, that the Georgia Power in this case would have to set up a separate subsidiary to do that.
Right.
Okay, that's pretty clear. Then in 75, going down to 75 through 78, basically, I think what you're saying here is that there'd have to be no discrimination between the different entities that provide the recharging. Is that right?
Correct.
I'm wondering why is that necessary in there?
I think that I heard one of the members ask the question yesterday, and it struck me, and that's exactly what we're doing. But you don't want your power bill at your home or business to be reflected by power that they're subsidizing off the rate base.
Okay, so, okay, I see.
So if they're going to be in the business, then it needs to be on an equal playing field. They don't
Okay.
need to be passing that on to the homeowners or someone else.
Okay, good.
There's
point.
no such, the old saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You might give it away for this month, but somebody's going to pay for it.
Okay, that's a good point. I wasn't thinking in terms of their subsidiary, but that does make sense. Okay, if there is one. So then, of course, this last 89 through 92, just pretty much self-explanatory. So it seems to me that the kind of the crux of the bill is in 72 through 74, and then 84 through 88, and that has to do with the tariffs. If you could explain, I mean, that's kind of, I think, where you're going as far as what has to be done in order for this to be accomplished. So if you could explain that 72 through 74, well, I guess I'm looking at the right thing, right bill, 72 through 74, and then 84 through 88.
Line 72 states that the owner before September the 1st of 22, that the electric supplier shall file a tariff with the PSC, which sets forth the rates, terms, and conditions of the sale of electricity to electric vehicle charging providers for the operation of those. And that's basically getting into the rate that they would charge for these to the operators of these chargers.
And then what does 84 through 88 do? There's a
That
says that
basically
commission shall not approve.
that basically says that the commission will adopt rules and regs and that they will set
Okay.
these tariffs.
Okay. And you feel like that this legislation will do what you want to accomplish?
I think this legislation, and as I talked about simple, I think this legislation will do two things that'll be necessity to move forward as a beginning of a blueprint.
Okay.
One is it will allow for the resale of power without screwing up the territorial system, territorial act. And secondly, it states that the power producers, that they will not be able to gain a foothold and have an unfair competitive advantage over the rest of the businesses, thus not being put back on the homeowner or the business owner on a normal rate base.
Okay, and there's some questions, but the question I think I almost forgot. So, but your legislation, you believe would also provide for the sale of the electricity to the customer to charge the vehicle by kilowatt hour? Is that true or not true?
Yes, yes.
And how is that? So how is that? I mean, I'm not challenging or saying, but how is that done in the bill? How's that?
You know, I think that I have someone that may can answer that. She's more of a,
Okay.
and if I may defer that to Terry Lindell, the attorney extraordinaire.
That's what I would do also. If you don't mind waiting just a minute, I mean, we'll go ahead and we have some other questions here for the author. Representative Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you. And just for on line 68, where you're talking about if an electric supplier wants to get into the business, they will do that under a separate unregulated entity. Is this written with the expectation there wouldn't be any cross subsidization? That word was mentioned yesterday in the hearing. Is that your understanding of the way it's currently written?
That's the intent.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, and you define make ready on line 61 through 63. Make ready infrastructure means electrical infrastructure required to service an electric load up to, but not beyond the electric supplier's side of the electric meter. And it shall obviously on the other side shall not include electric vehicle charging equipment. I don't know if you were in the meeting yesterday when I asked that particular question. I still have a little bit of concern about a competitive advantage for the power providers, that if they are in the as your bill alludes to in 68 through 71, start a unregulated subsidiary to sell power, that they might have a competitive advantage in deciding where their make ready work goes, meaning that they might have to run a line or beef up a line or get that a higher capacity to deliver a higher electric load to a particular location. And it would be problematic if they jumped ahead of other providers that might. Is there an application process? How would you control that make ready part of it?
You know, at some point, and I'm not a bomb thrower when it comes to dealing with utilities. I remember the day when the power companies, they used to sell appliances. Well, that went out real quick because they defined what their job is. Their definition of what a power company is, and is for the production of electricity for all of Georgians and for the delivery system. Being in the charging business would not be something I think that they want to get into. But I think that the corporate mentality that we deal with is they want to keep all their options open. And I want to go back to what I'd said originally. This isn't a specific, this only deals with two specific issues, but it sets some policy that it gives a blueprint, a roadmap. There's a lot of us that won't be here in 8 or 10 years if electric vehicles are the mode of the day. But this would set a framework so that future legislators, those that are sitting in our seats, and they'll know how to go forward. It would also set some parameters to the utility companies that, wait a minute, we have a legislature that's set forth, and that helps us with our future planning to what we want to do. I think they understand very crystal clear that neither the legislators, current or the future, are going to allow them to have an unfair playing field when you have tens of thousands of other jobs that are at stake, the investments in the C-store and the retail business. I mean, this whole business that Congress has opened up, I think is going to change the way business and travel and transportation is. Now, is this going to be the final version? I don't know. We didn't specifically put any rate structures in here. And that was because I did not want that in here. That should be set forth for future generations of lawmakers to do. I didn't put anything in this about other issues that I thought might be dealt with. And we know one of them is going to be dealt with. If you notice specifically, I didn't put a section in here setting forth a road tax to replace the motor fuel tax that goes to DOT. DOT's already calculated in their mystic world of what that's going to be. So at the proper time, they'll come forth and there'll be legislatures to do it. This is just a frame. This is just a roadmap.
And follow up question. That's all I'm asking is, as we laying out this roadmap, that's one of the things we need to consider.
That is correct. That is correct.
And is it not true that you're 100% right that keeping our road infrastructure up, that's a huge part of this whole equation moving forward? It's how to future legislators and future citizens send the dollars to the state to keep the road infrastructure up. And it's a big question.
In these infancy stages of EV charging, I know that I think that Georgia Power, I think they've told me they've got 50 something or 70 something chargers out there right now. The EMCs, they have a few. I know if you go by some of the EMC offices, they've got a pro bono charger out there, basically for the convenience of their customers. Now in the real world, that ain't gonna last long, folks. You know, I go back to what I said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. nor will the ratepayers tolerate an unfair playing field in transferring it to the homeowners' rates.
Energy Subcommittee Chairman Chuck Martin, I think, are you on here? You wanted to, oh, there you are. I thought you were online. Yeah. Well, you're still recognized. I think you wanted to respond to something that Representative Williamson had asked. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to note for the record how quietly I entered the room so that not to upset. Chairman Powell, I had a question, but to clarify what Representative Williamson was asking, I believe I'm correct in saying as far as the make-ready infrastructure, I don't think that's really used in the bill here. But I believe somebody from the PSC can validate this for me, that when a regulated utility has another for-profit company, there has to be a hard what we would, I'd probably use a bad terminology, but in the legal world, it's referred to as a Chinese wall or a bright red line between. They can't share information. If the unregulated, the for-profit utility for the charges, they can't talk about where they wish to put them so that their regulated utility might all of a sudden put lines out by them. That I believe, if somebody from PSC is here, they're prohibited from talking across regulated and unregulated companies by state law and maybe even in federal statutes, correct?
Yes, my understanding is Regional Council Executive Directors Commission, we have rules against cross-subsidization when it comes to regulated versus their unregulated.
Yeah, so that just to clear further up what the and then I wanted to, as Chairman Parsons so aptly pointed out, the findings normally in a bill, we don't read them that hard and fast because they're just findings that aren't that applicable. But do I read correctly in line 86? You're asking the commission to use those findings to base their tariff, right? So, yes. I mean, as we look through the bill, it's important to also make sure that those are a little bit more than window dressing. I'm not holding any problem to them, but sometimes findings in a bill are just correct. Window dressing. These actually have some application to law, and they're good points you make in there, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make sure that we were referring back to 46.3B1. Thank you. Thank you for the question. You've got another question, if you don't mind taking it.
I'm at the mercy of this committee.
You want to take this one? I know it'll be a good question. Representative Frazier has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Chairman Martin just covered it. Chairman Powell on lines 84 to 86 is the same concern I have. And as you notice, I'm very concerned about the ratepayers and about the subsidizing and making sure that I'm all for the electrical vehicles. I just don't want the cost being sent over to Georgians if they're not selling enough of them or not getting enough profit back. And so you said this was a roadmap. You purposely did not put anything about rate-based paying in here for future legislators. So the PSC, the commission, will this be the code section that's on 86, line 86, where the electric suppliers will set their rate based on this code section that we already have in place?
Yes.
Since this is a new business.
This basically says that the PSC will consider, and then referring back to 46.3B1, which was the start of the bill that set forth the legislative findings, that the PSC would consider these legislative findings into allowing these rates to be set.
Okay, so all these electrical companies that would be buying power, they can't set their own rate. They have to go use this code to start.
Georgia Power does. If you remember, the MCs are not subject to the MC, nor is MEAG. But in the real world, they don't deviate a whole lot. Generally, whatever the policy one is, they're all pretty well stick to the same policy.
All right, I was just making sure that we had fair practices for everybody, and some of the rates are not going to be exorbitant too high. And I have a choice to go where I want for the cheapest rate, just like I do gas.
Right.
All right, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. I'm gonna, if you like, I'm gonna give you a chance at the end of the testimony to come back and wrap up or answer, rebut in any way you want to.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the diligence of the committee.
Thank you for being here. First on this list is Jeff Pratt with Green EMC. I bet he's online. Is that right? All right. Jeff, if you're there and you hear me, you're recognized. Jeff
Yes,
Pratt.
sir. Yes, sir, I am. Can you hear me okay, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Very good. My name is Jeff Pratt. I'm president of Green Power EMC, represent the electric cooperatives in the state of Georgia. As I'm sure many of you know, we provide electric service, much like Mr. Powell, Representative Powell indicated, to about 70% of the land area in the state of Georgia, much of which is very rural, and about half the population of the state of Georgia. We're democratically member governed and member owned. So the rates and policies that our cooperatives implement are implemented by a board of directors that are elected by the entities that actually pay the bills and pay the rates. And so electric vehicles and the purpose or the topic of this bill are extremely interesting, as Representative Powell said, in the sense that it is a transition that for many of the industries in the state, everybody from auto dealers and service providers to utilities to convenience stores and many others. Today, at about 1% of the vehicles in the United States are electric vehicles. About 0.5% roughly in Georgia are electric vehicles. And that is growing very fast, but from a very small base. We're watching this growth very closely because it is our responsibility to make sure that the infrastructure is available and ready at the time our customer owners, our members, require services from us for charging these vehicles. Electric vehicles aren't like a convenience appliance. It is something that, much like in many cases for health, an air conditioner is important to many of us for health, and vehicles also have a public requirement in the state, and we take that responsibility very seriously. So our cooperatives today own and operate about maybe less than a dozen very fast chargers. It's the same kind of charging that we expect will be the part of the charging infrastructure that will be important for public charging around the state. It will be the type of charging, when I say fast, I mean charge within a few minutes. Right now it's 20 to 30 minutes. And that's much as close as you can get to the current fill by the gallon gasoline equivalent. We own a few of those, and the primary purpose for those are to help our member customers and to understand how electric vehicles work, help them understand how vehicles could be adopted, and understand the right choices that they can make. And so, much like many of the technologies that utilities in our world in the last 85 years have helped bring convenience to customers, we have entered into different businesses to help customers understand how to use electricity more conveniently, more efficiently, and cost effectively. Representative Powell mentioned appliances. That's a great example. Today, we are not in the appliance business in Georgia, and our co-ops, none of them are. And the reason is there's no reason for us to be there to promote those products. But today, we are in such an early phase of EV adoption that in the many of the areas we serve, we find it may be necessary for us to provide some level of support to our membership to help them to receive electric vehicle charging service where it's just less profitable than it was than there it might be in the future. We are in this pace where we need to bridge a period to where we can effectively service the public across every aspect of our economy and every aspect. And I think that the chairman, I think that Representative Powell recognizes that rural piece that utilities, cooperatives have in the state, and have acknowledged that by giving us some flexibility as we move forward in the way this bill is written. The sales for resale of the kilowatt hours is something that we very much think is not necessarily in ours or convenience store's best interest, but is more so in the customer's best interest. So we're very supportive of that. We do look forward to working with the subcommittee to determine make sure the language that is used there has no unintended consequences, which could be important for many other aspects of the business. I'd like to make just a couple other comments, and those are related to what is the state of the charging business and infrastructure today? Today, utilities in the state of Georgia are roughly composed about 5% or less of public charging. There is a lot of private actors out there today that are operating and competing for that business, even at this early stage. We don't have any intention of ever competing with others, but others. In fact, the others that we would compete with would be our customers, our members. Convenience stores and others in that business are our customers and members. And just as a general practice, we don't compete with our own customers. That's not going to happen. And so we want our purpose, if we do put in more public charging, is simply to fill voids where it makes less sense. Much like the purpose that electric cooperatives were formed in back in the back 85 years ago, to provide services to areas where it is less, it is not so profitable to do so in other parts, but necessary services that these rural areas actually need. Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate the opportunity to make some remarks here. There are, and look forward to working with any subcommittee to make sure these policies and practices come out to work out to the best for all concerned, for all our members, the convenience stores, in-use customers that are driving the cars, and to make sure that this process it works out to be a very seamless process to all of our constituents, which is the public who will be driving these cars across the state, and hopefully improving our economy as that happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Pratt from members of the committee? Don't see any. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your testimony. Next is Jay Smith with Charge Ahead Partnership. If you're here, if you will, I've just identified you, but if you will identify yourself, your name and your organization.
Good afternoon, Chairman Parsons and members of the committee. My name is Jay Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Charge Ahead Partnership, a consortium of businesses, organizations, and individuals advocating for policies that will expand its further development of the EV charging network. Simply put, many of our members would like to be in the EV charging business. You've been handed a presentation that green one. It sort of tracks a little bit with my remarks here today. Our organization represents gas stations, convenience stores, truck stops, and grocery stores, many of the very same businesses that currently offer fuel for gas-powered vehicles who would like to do the same for electric vehicles. We're on the cusp of an electric vehicle breakthrough. However, if the EV market is really going to take off, we must answer the question that looms in many people's minds: where will I charge? Sometimes referred to as range anxiety, this fear of not knowing if I'm going to make it to my destination on a charge is valid. The majority of EV drivers today currently charge their cars at home with low-speed chargers, and that may work for daily commuters who have access to a plug at home. But home chargers that take 8 to 10 hours to fully charge a car are not a long-term solution. America needs a vast network of accessible, affordable, and strategically located high-speed charging stations. Recharging your vehicle, your electric vehicle, should be as simple as filling your car with gas. And so the question is, why is it not that simple? Companies like the ones I represent already have the real estate in the most convenient locations for drivers, the amenities that drivers want, and have a system of transparent pricing that drivers have come to expect. So why hasn't that same industry placed EV chargers at their locations that dot along all the interstates and highways and almost most intersections? Unfortunately, there are two primary barriers to companies getting into the EV charging business. First, they simply cannot compete with power companies that are able to subsidize their costs of the EV chargers and the electricity to recharge with money from ratepayers. And second, the rate structure for EV charging, which includes substantial fees, is not workable for businesses to recoup those costs from EV drivers, especially when power companies operating their own EV chargers do not pass along those same costs to their customers. House Bill 1322 seeks to address these problems and removes the obstacles that are in the way of private investment stepping up to the plate to bring more EV charging stations to Georgia. Looking specifically at what this legislation does, first, it allows for the resale of electricity by non-utility third-party electric vehicle charging operators. I think most people in the room will agree with that provision. Second, this legislation also requires an electric supplier to file a tariff with the PSC, specifically for EV charging. The current rate structure makes it economically impossible for private third-party providers to offer EV charging. The bill simply states that the tariff cannot discriminate and must be competitively neutral and create a level playing field. And finally, the legislation protects ratepayers from the subsidizing the cost of EV charging equipment, ownership, and operations, much to the question that you asked earlier. Right now, power companies are able to hike the power bill of all its ratepayers in order to subsidize the cost of running EV charging stations. We simply cannot compete with that. There are private companies willing to take on those costs and make the investment. We should create a regulatory environment where it makes sense for them to do so. And I think just as important it is to understand what the bill does, I also want to address what the bill does not do. The bill does not prevent a utility from owning and operating EV chargers. This bill is about creating a level playing field. If a public utility wants to open EV charging stations, they can do so, but it should be done under the same rates, terms, and conditions as the rest of the EV charging industry. We believe this is best done as a separate, unregulated entity to ensure that all EV charging providers, including the power companies, are operating under the same set of rules. Second, the bill does not actually set a specific tariff. The Georgia Public Service Commission continues to have that jurisdiction over rate setting. Setting rates on investor-owned utilities is complicated and rightly belongs to the PSC. And so this bill doesn't set that rate. Instead, it simply instructs the PSC to set a rate that all players in the market would be charged. And lastly, the bill does not affect the 40+ EMCs and municipal electric suppliers in Georgia. I've heard some say that this legislation and opening up the EV charging to more participants is really premature and not needed while electric vehicles account for so few of the cars that are on our roads today. And I would wholeheartedly disagree with that. The longer we wait to create an environment where third parties can compete for EV drivers' business, the more difficult it will be to make the investment to build out the EV charging network. The further along we go down the road of power companies having monopoly here, the more challenging it is for new entrants to enter the market and compete. In summary, this legislation will create a framework to build a robust EV charging network that is inclusive of all communities and eliminates that range anxiety so that Georgia drivers will have the confidence they need to make the switch to EVs if they so choose. It also protects Georgia ratepayers and creates a competitive marketplace for EV charging that incentivizes private investment and stimulates innovation. And the end result will be what Georgians care about most: fair, reasonable, and affordable prices. I want to thank you for your time today and for the opportunity to speak with this committee.
For coming very much. You have a question if you care to take it.
Sure.
Chairman Martin, I think it is.
Just a brief question. So you represent a group of people that would potentially put in these at various places?
Yes.
Okay. So the question I have here is, this rate that would be created, presumably you would put your machine in and you would make a margin on the electric. I mean, somebody has to pay for it. So that's what works. So my question is, the economics of it. I heard yesterday that a gentleman had an EV and he was on a tariff system that Georgia Power provided them in their home. That was a sliding scale that, you know, it's like regular power, cheaper power than middle of the night power, for lack of
Off
but yeah, it was, well, I think what I heard from him was, you know, regular off peak and then off peak or whatever, you know, 2 cents a kilowatt hour.
Sure.
So the question is, do you see the need for, and I know we're not going to prescribe this in the legislation, I'm just asking for input for the PSC. Do you see that same tariff structure available to the people that would be doing this, so that if you wheel into, I hate to, your favorite C-store, right? I don't want to give anybody free advertisement, but if you wheel into that at you know, 12 o'clock at night, because those are open and people are on the way home from work, whatever, that you would be able to buy that at 2 cents instead of 8 cents. Do you see that kind of a tariff structure available commercially as well?
We're not opposed to that if there's for the sale of for the use of the electricity. What actually our barrier to getting in is that demand charge that is set. It is basically, and our folks from friends from Georgia Power could explain better, but the peak that any business uses in a certain interval, usually a 15-minute window.
No, I got you.
That's the challenge.
No, I understand that, and you're gonna hit that if you put those out there.
Sure.
I don't want to
Sure.
broach that subject because I understand what you're saying there. I'm just saying you would see that as a something that you would like look forward in the tier structure. Okay,
yes,
fair enough.
we could
I
do that.
don't want to
Yeah.
overcomplicate it, but that's just a difference of it costs this much, you know, cents per kilowatt hour, 24 hours a day, or it moves up
Sure.
and down. Because in theory, then you could actually drop your retail price, you know, if you charge it at 1 o'clock. Okay, fair enough.
Absolutely. The key is that we're all playing by those same
Absolutely.
rates.
Representative Frazier.
Yes, sir. Can you just give me a visual? I mean, and the members here on the committee, now I've seen some of the charging stations. So what is the future? What am I to look at, like on I-20 or something? I don't see charging stations out there. And so what, can you just tell me how are these stations gonna look? They're gonna look like the little charging stations that we see on the side?
They
or
are they are very much going to look like what you see when you drive into a gas station. It is a pump about the size of a, you know, actually smaller than a fuel pump. But I think eventually, as the market grows, you will see gas stations replace some of their fuel pumps of
With
gasoline,
those, okay.
replacing it with EV.
So
And the
we-
technology will improve. So, you know, and again, we're talking about fast chargers. We're not talking the ones that you see a lot of times you see a charger at a hotel and they offer that as a service to their guests. You know, that's a slow charge that they say you can plug in overnight and that's going to take 6 hours, you know, or 8 hours or 10 hours to charge. We're talking about the experience where you're going to want to go, you're going to want to charge up, run in, use the restroom, grab a candy bar and come back out and then get on your way. And we'll see it at the gas station. That's why in order to expand quickly and efficiently, we think that those that are currently doing it with fuel, liquid fuel, are positioned well to meet the needs of drivers. We are where drivers expect us to be to recharge. I don't have to think about where am I going to map out, where am I going to recharge if I were to travel 500 miles and worry about, will I reach there? I don't plan that out as an owner of a gas powered car. Where am I going to get gas? And we want to make sure that EV drivers have that same confidence.
Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Just a quick answer. This committee heard testimony yesterday, and for the first time, I heard about this super cool, super fast electricity delivery system that Ford Motor Company and some research university is working on. I'm sorry, Purdue. Have you studied that technology? And if so, is there any expected timeline? Are they giving you any kind of horizon? Is that a 12 months out or 12 years
Yeah, I
out?
can't answer that question directly. I do know the technology is evolving very quickly. And that is a good thing for drivers who want to move to EV. It's certainly the more you can cut down the length of time
And
certainly
that-
helps,
that
but I don't
answers
know the timeline.
You answered my question because you're right. We talk about range anxiety, but we also talk about fueling time anxiety as well. But thank you.
Yes.
I don't, I don't see any further questions. I wanted to ask you though, you had mentioned in your presentation what Georgians want and deserve. Not very many of them want and deserve this though, or at least want it. I mean, there are not that many EVs on the road right now, are there?
No, what my point was, I think they want transparent pricing and fair pricing, whether they're driving a gas powered car or whether they're driving an electric vehicle. And we have that in the gas business right now. You can look as you drive down the street, you can look up and you can see a price here, and you can probably literally look across the street at an intersection and look at a price there.
Right.
And that kind of transparency in pricing is what we want to bring to the EV
Well,
market as well.
I mean, yes. But I guess the point I'm trying to raise is, or put in the form of a question, which I can't figure out how to do, but the people who drive gasoline powered vehicles or diesel powered vehicles and really don't have any interest in EVs, they don't care about this. I mean, you said Georgians, and I think that you should frame that Georgians who have electric vehicles, they are concerned about this.
Mhm.
And so let me ask you this, and you talked about the future. What do you see the future of EVs? How quickly do you envision the market, or not necessarily the market, but the number of EVs on the road in Georgia? How do you see that evolving?
You know, the goals that the federal government is kind of forcing this issue. I think people are probably not as eager as maybe the federal government is to push them. But when you look at what, it was seven car companies ran commercials during the Super Bowl, specifically about their transition to electric vehicles. And they're doing that, some by choice, maybe some by force,
Yeah.
but it is coming.
Okay, it kind of seems that way to me too.
Yeah.
So, okay. Representative Fraser, you had
Yes,
another
sir.
question?
Just one final question, Mr. Chairman. I live in rural Georgia. So I'm very concerned about if I do go buy EV, how, or is Charge Ahead partnership, are you all going to put charging stations out there in the rural area to accommodate the ones that want to purchase these EVs?
Sure. We want to be able to serve folks wherever they live, not, regardless of their zip code or their county that they're in. I think what you will see happen is even in a rural community, it's important because we're serving not only the people in that rural community, but the people who are driving between two urban communities. And so what happens typically, you see gas stations in rural communities probably are a little bit closer to that highway or closer to that interstate type of thing. I think you'll see that first in those types of rural communities where, and then eventually, as the market demands, it will expand even further into those communities.
And I
But
just
that is
got
important.
Yeah, and I just got a text on my phone from some folks that are online. They want to know, are you going to put charging stations in Walmart? I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think Chairman Martin, you have
I just to follow up and
Sure.
and I'm for people having access to what they want, but I also want to be very careful when we talk about this. Range anxiety is most certainly holding things back. If you've driven between Las Vegas and LA, you see it. There's a couple of big Tesla charging stations that have been put there. But correct me if I'm wrong, and it's been a few months since I attended a meeting on this. But I think the estimated cost to build out a grid that would provide for ubiquitous EV charging, because you have to have that capability, is well over $1 trillion. Is that not true? Just for the continental United States, isn't that true?
That sounds correct. I can't.
So again, I don't mean to throw cold water on the thing. This is all because you start, crawl before you walk before you run, all that stuff. But for anyone that thinks that this legislation can just magically, that these are going to start appearing so that you can drive ubiquitously around the country like you can with gas powered vehicles. I mean, that took decades, before there was range. I mean, my grandfather, I remember him telling me there was range anxiety driving from North Fulton to Atlanta, when back in the 20s. So I just don't want us to get over our skis, because what's going to happen is that gentleman from the PSC, is it not true, is going to have people, when these things start going out there, there's going to be pressure on our regulated utility to upgrade that infrastructure, which is in fact going to get in the rate base. And so just to look, when that tariff comes out that's causing this, it may need to take into account some of that additional rate base. So just fair is not exactly like it looks today. This costs a lot of money. It may be where we're going, but it's going to take a minute to get there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to drive that point even further, that's fine. And as long as we're all playing by that same rate, that's the key.
Thank you. I mean, you made some good points. I appreciate your answer. There
Thanks
is
for your
another
time
question or
today.
two, if you'll take them.
Oh,
Representative Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a quick question in reading the bill and not being an electrician. When we talk about recharging batteries at 400 volts or greater, how much more demand is that going to put on the grid and or at a particular station? And we talk about building out in rural Georgia. Is that going to require three-phase expansion, or is that going to be able to be done on single-phase expansion?
Yeah, and that's probably a better question for the power folks to answer that question. There is certainly, as Americans become more dependent on electricity, EVs being one of the causes of that, it is going to require those that are generating the power to increase capacity. Absolutely. And that's what they do well, and they can focus on that, and we'll take it to the vehicle for them.
I think you have one more question. Go ahead and take it.
Sure.
Representative Singleton online, I believe.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm out here working on my homestead, talking about EVs. So first of all, I appreciate the legislation. Kind of my concerns with it, kind of like the other chairman was talking about, that we had some of these same questions when we went to the interstate highway system off of rail, and anytime there's a major leap in technology, there's concerns with it. But my biggest concern with the rate structuring and manipulating that is, that there's a big burden on the EMCs and the power providers because of peak usage hours and their total capacity available to produce at any given time. And with my concern with the EV market is it's much more difficult to modulate that. Right now with home use, it's primarily low use hours in the evening and at night when they're charging, and they actually can offer rate reductions if they charge over those times. And so I just want to make sure as our committee that we're looking forward. I love that we're looking forward, but I want to make sure that we consider that, and have you consider that, and the way you're trying to make sure that it's fair and equitable in the rates across the spectrum.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think, we have, just like in today where investor-owned utility is putting into their base rate part of that grid that they're building out there that brings it to our homes. And that part of the cost to them will probably always continue to be part of that base rate. It's taking it from, if you think of it, but they don't use the ratepayer money to put the wires in your home and get it to your cell phone charger, that kind of thing. The demand charge that you're talking about and those spikes and things that are the challenge that power companies have today, as the market grows and there are more EVs, that spike will actually start to level off, because instead of having 3 drivers come during the day that created a huge spike, we'll have a continuous use of customers that helps level that out. And so they will be able to kind of, anticipate those a little bit more readily.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation.
Yeah, thanks for
We
your
have a
time.
couple more speakers on this. Stephanie Gosman. You will tell us who you are and who you represent.
Absolutely.
Just like yesterday, we already know, but if you would do it for the record.
Certainly. Well, good afternoon, and you got the name right, so thank you. But good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members. of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again with you today regarding House Bill 1322. My name is Stephanie Gossman. I'm the Electric Transportation Manager for Georgia Power, and I'm accompanied by Larry Legg, Georgia Power's Pricing and Rates Director today. Today, I plan to first provide an overview of our electric transportation program that's mentioned in this bill, along with some brief context about the market in Georgia. Larry will be able to cover any discussion related to rates as mentioned in this bill. Before digging into our program, I'd like to first thank the bill sponsor, Chairman Powell, for his leadership on working with all the stakeholders, including Georgia Power, to explore ways to best serve consumers and position Georgia as a leader in EV market growth. I want to be clear that Georgia Power conceptually supports several sections of this bill, including the sale of electricity by kilowatt hour for the purposes of EV charging only, and the desire of some customers for a tariff that supports customers who want to provide EV charging. We have shared language and are actively working with the bill sponsor and other parties both to fully consider these issues as well as address any concerns related to the other issues of the bill. So in Georgia, we are certainly seeing an increased interest in EV adoption. Although we are behind the national average on EV purchases, we're still showing signs of progress that we expect to continue over the next several years. The latest DOE data from 2020 shows there are over 23,000 current EV registrations in the state at that time. Now, certainly that number has grown some over 2021, but it's minuscule when compared to over 8.8 million total motor vehicle registrations in the state at that same time. Mr. Pratt mentioned it earlier, it's less than 0.5% of the total vehicle registrations, less than 0.5% today. Georgia is thankfully already seen as a leader in publicly available charging, however, which is a key enabler to future EV adoption by consumers in the state. And this kind of goes back to the chicken or the egg question yesterday, I believe it was. I mean, charging infrastructure has to come first. It's got to lead the way. In order for the adoption trends to continue and for consumers to want to purchase EVs, there must be a lot of publicly available charging infrastructure, in addition to the option to charge at home and at work. By the end of 2020, there were already thousands of publicly available charging ports throughout the state, and this number continued to grow last year. These charging sites are installed and operated by many different EV charging service providers, including utilities, which represent a very small portion of the available chargers. In fact, Georgia Power owns only about a 3% share in this market today. The remaining 97% are owned by other charging providers with a variety of business models. Georgia Power is proud to be a small part of the solution to provide public charging options throughout the state, which is seen as a significant barrier to EV adoption. The infrastructure programs we're able to offer are critical for customers to help reduce costs for new technology adoption when it's still in its infancy, which has been described already, such as EV charging, and it will be for several more years. Georgia Power's community charging program fills the current void to encourage drivers who want to purchase an EV by providing public fast charging infrastructure to help build range confidence. I think I've heard that term already, range confidence traveling throughout Georgia. And we currently own and operate 57 sites throughout the state through this program. This program began as a pilot in 2014 and was later approved by the Georgia Public Service Commission through the 2019 rate case order, whereby we received $6 million over 3 years to expand public charging infrastructure. Initially, the pilot program added public fast chargers primarily in the metro Atlanta area. But since the 2019 rate case order, over 80% of the new sites have been added outside Atlanta, including Cleveland, Cornelia, Livonia, Trenton, Perry, Brunswick, Leesburg, Metter, Richmond Hill, and several others. Through this program, we are able to provide public fast charging solutions in areas where private sector investments just won't be able to justify locating, likely for several more years. I think you heard the term eventually just mentioned, and that includes rural and underserved communities. We do this through working with customers, including convenience stores, who want to attract EV drivers to their sites and be part of enabling EV charging in their communities. Examples of customers who ask to be part of this program include quick serve restaurants, municipalities and cities, lodging, and many others, including 5 current sites at smaller convenience store chains that are all located outside Atlanta. That's nearly 10% of our existing sites that are in convenience stores that are all outside of Atlanta. While these locations are driven by our customers that want to host the chargers, They must also meet several standard criteria, including safety, accessibility, and proximity to travel corridors and other public fast charging options. We've followed guidance from the Federal Highway Administration to strategically locate fast charging sites along key corridors to enable long-distance EV travel throughout Georgia. And I'm going to mention it again, we want to build range confidence to combat that range anxiety. To be clear, Georgia Power is in the business of providing safe, reliable, affordable, and clean electricity, not the EV charging business. However, in this market, there's a need for infrastructure today to help us achieve the growth that we expect to see in several years. Mr. Pratt mentioned that bridge, help get across that bridge. And we are uniquely situated as a regulated utility to invest in our rural and underserved communities, especially. So this technology will be accessible for all Georgians if or when they're ever ready. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak and share with you some of the facts about the EV market in Georgia and how Georgia Power is supporting Georgians through ensuring they will have EV charging infrastructure when they need it. And I'm happy to address any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Chairman Martin.
Thank you for your testimony. I can't help but do this, it's not Georgia Power that are providing this, it's the ratepayers. And that's what bothers me a little bit in this. And I don't think you're opposed to this. I think you're working on this legislation in good faith with everybody. But I just think everybody needs to understand that you're basically putting these chargers out there, and there's somebody that's living hand to mouth in places in Georgia that are paying. It's minuscule, it's pennies a year perhaps, but somebody decided that we're going to provide these for people that drive $100,000 EVs to make their life easier, and Georgians are paying more. That's what Representative Fraser is worried about. So I'm fully endorsing, a plan to take the acquisition of the charger out of the rate base. And I would like you, if you are able or cleared to talk about that, if it's proper to ask that question, Mr. Chairman.
I never like the questions, talk about something, because that can go on for a long time.
Okay, well,
I really don't.
and the hour is like, well, I mean, we can do it in
If
subcommittee.
you have a
I would
specific
like,
question.
well, the question is, I mean, you're in the business of generating and get power to all of Georgians, not a select few. And I get it. You put these things out there. They're $75,000, $100,000 a piece, right?
There's substantial investment,
something like
that's
that.
right.
And you put them in the rate base and you earn on them, whether anybody plugs into them or not. And there's somebody again in Atlanta, Georgia, or rural Georgia that's having tough times paying bills that are paying just a little bit more. And so, I mean, I'd like you to get out of that business and let the private sector do it. And I think you're doing that in working with the bill. So my question to you is, you're a regulated utility, the PSC puts you in this business. We'd like to help you get out of it.
And I certainly understand the position and where you're coming from and appreciate that. I would say, I shared with you my belief, but I'll give you two other points to go with that to support back to the infancy, the stage we are in this market, the rural and underserved communities, and not trying to leave certain communities behind where this program is able to do that through the rate basing opportunities. But the 2 points are, one, really what's not happening already, which is the investment in some of these areas. And two, there's other states out there that have passed similar legislation that then had to go back and walk it back so that utilities could come back and enter the market for underserved and rural areas in particular, because those investments didn't come over several years.
Well, and I'll finish with this, but isn't it true? I'd like to see, I'd like to see you do that. And if you want to do that as a corporate citizen, do that with your investors' money and not the ratepayers' money. Because if you believe in that and you want to do it, then go to a private firm and do it and make it work. I'll be done with that, but it's.
Thank you, Martin. Appreciate the questions. Sir, did you have anything that you had something you wanted to bring, right?
I did. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to speak for a couple of minutes about to address a couple of things that have come up about rates. Obviously, it's our pleasure to serve our customers as Georgia Power customers. It's also our obligation to serve those customers, to treat them fairly. The Public Service Commission, of course, is the main body governing that through rate making proceedings like we'll file later this year. In this space, and I'll differentiate, there are two different things that can be confused. There's Georgia Power selling electricity to the company that's going to provide charging services. And that's one rate. That's the rate I'm going to talk about, what Georgia Power sells its electricity to the charging company for. And then the charging company charges whatever it cares to charge for someone who comes up and plugs in their car. So they may charge 25 cents a minute or whatever it is. So I'm talking about the part that Georgia Power charges for the EV charging companies. There are many rates for commercial customers. I think we've said in the past there are over 1,700 charging stations or charging locations across the state right now. Many of those are served by Georgia Power, of course. Many of those are on existing commercial rates that they qualify for and have expressed satisfaction. That being the case, certainly we work at the commission to develop new rates for different applications all the time. We introduce new rates periodically at the Public Service Commission. The important thing to us is when introducing new rates, that we recover our costs. Obviously, as we're obligated to serve, we have to make investment, as we've heard today, and then we're obligated to serve our customers, and we recover those costs that the customers cause when we're selling electricity to them. Rate design theory really across the industry is standard, and really there's three big buckets when you look at costs that are caused by customers we serve: customer related costs and demand related costs. And those are really, if you think of it, it's any kind of business, you have fixed and variable. Those are the fixed components. We build power plants, we build transmission lines, distribution lines, substations. Those are the demand related costs. The customer related costs, we install a meter at your house. We run a line from the transformer to your home and things like that. We have a billing system to bill you, even if you don't use any electricity. And then there's the energy. The third bucket is energy. And so that's the variable piece of it, depending on how much energy you use each month. All three of those are real cost components, and all three of them are costs that we have to recover. So when we talk about those three buckets, they're all real. They all represent investment to serve our customers. And they're all very important in rate making. There are different ways that you can design rates to get around that. You know, you can recover one category of costs in another category, but that's not the best design for rate making. You really want to look at what costs are being caused by component and design your rates around that. Obviously, that varies a lot. Right now, EV charging is a nascent industry. We're both very familiar with it. We both drive EVs. I've driven a Leaf for 7.5 years now. So I've plugged in a lot of places. Most of the charging I do is at home. And so I just pay as part of my home power bill. But when I plug into, a public charging spot, I'm paying what that company charges me, and they're buying from whoever the provider is for that. So as long as those rates are designed economically for the utility to be able to recover their costs, that's our concern in this whole matter. Certainly, we've got rates that cover tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers. So from a fairness standpoint, everybody's on the same tariff. Everybody's paying the same rate. The PSC holds us to that standard. We can't discriminate from customer to customer. As long as somebody qualifies, they're in a certain class that qualifies for a certain rate, they'll pay a similar amount. It may be different based on how they use energy. If their load is very peaky and causes very high demand charges, but they use little energy, versus somebody that has a really steady load that uses a lot of energy over the same peak. So that's what really determines the rates that are paid.
Well, thank you very much for both your presentations. Appreciate you coming today, and very thorough. We do have a question. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just ask a real quick question. We've heard yesterday and today that you have about 57 charging stations across the state right now that are publicly available. Are those are there charges to use those? Are you charging consumers, customers, whoever comes up to use those facilities now?
We do. We do charge by unit of time right now, consistent with the current law, back to some of the other conversations. But I would say we offer both level 2 and DC fast charging. So it depends on which level, but in terms of what is charged to the drivers, right? If they're getting that fast charging versus level 2.
Okay, so, and I'm assuming internally there is a system where you determine what your true cost is and you somehow base that charge on the cost of the power company. How is there a rate structure for that you use internally? I guess I'm saying, is it being treated as a cost unit or as a business unit within the company now? No, it's just that since we're producing the electricity, we don't pay ourselves a retail rate, because then we'd just be collecting the money that we paid. So it's just internal use, company use for the electricity. Okay. Okay.
Thank you for that question.
And I'd like to add actually just one more thing, if I could, on that, which is consistent of how we use all of our company facilities, which this is an extension of our company facilities.
Okay. Thank you very much. We do not want to not hear from you.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to come back today. Well, I appreciate that. I know the hour grows late. So my name is Angela Holland. I serve as the president of the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores. We represent large chains as well as multiple generational businesses in urban and suburban areas as well. As I stated yesterday, our industry is located in every area of the state. No matter the fuel, we're ready to serve the motoring public, and we're enthusiastic about the role that we play in the electric vehicle revolution. Yesterday, Mr. Chairman, you asked me a question if our organization had given any thought to competing with Georgia Power, and I wanted to first thank you for allowing me to defer that to today. As Chairman Powell said, House Bill 1322 addresses multiple issues that the convenience store refers to as barriers to entry into the EV charging market. There were several questions that were asked yesterday, and I'd like to provide just a little more clarity on those if I could. Representative Frazier, you asked, where are we in the process of electric vehicles? In late 2021, President Biden announced a $15 billion investment to fund a national network of over 500,000 charging stations. The White House press release states, through a combination of grant and incentive programs for state and local governments and the private sector, it will support a transformational acceleration in the deployment of a mix of chargers in apartment buildings, public parking, throughout communities, and robust fast charging along nation's roadways. Convenience stores are in the right locations to provide fuel to motorists, whether that fuel is petroleum-based or any other alternative, including electricity. In addition to the Biden administration announcement in November 2021, 11 automakers, including Ford and General Motors, signed the 2021 UN Climate Convention's Conference of the Parties Agreement to accelerate transition to zero-emission vehicles. The first week in January, Hyundai and Kia announced they will no longer design gas-powered engines. Further, Chrysler, the fourth largest automaker in the world, announced its plans to launch the first battery-operated vehicle and transition to an all-electric offering. Mercedes-Benz, Jaguar, and Volvo have also announced plans to switch from an internal combustion engine to electric. Additionally, Toyota announced they will have 15 electric models available by 2025. And the Super Bowl Sunday night General Motors ad indicated they would have 15 models deployed by 2025 as well. The Edison Electric Institute estimates 18 million EVs will be on the road by 2030. While this certainly won't happen overnight, it does represent a sea change, one that requires a tremendous amount of preparation and cooperation from retailers, energy producers, and elected officials. I believe Representative Kennard asked, are there other states that have implemented by kilowatt hour? And Chairman Parsons followed that with, are those states regulated or unregulated? I provided packets with information that include a map of the regulated and unregulated states, as well as a chart of the states that have passed similar laws. The chart indicates that as of July 2020, 35 states could sell by the kilowatt hour. And if I'm not mistaken, Texas, Kansas, and North Dakota all passed similar legislation during their last legislative sessions, bringing that number to 38. So it's a combination of regulated and unregulated states that have passed resale by kilowatt hour. Chairman Parsons, you also asked me if our organization had thought about how this would be competing with Georgia Power. Yes, Mr. Chairman, an unlevel playing field. Competing with a monopoly is one of our biggest concerns. The number one priority in our industry is to fuel motorists, be it fossil fuels, compressed natural gas, propane, or a Slurpee. The utility's job is to produce power. And as you know, convenience stores operate in a robust, competitive market, while utilities are granted the protections of a monopoly. With this legislation, we hope to level that playing field by asking Georgia Power to create a subsidiary to provide this service just as any other retailer would, the same rates and demand charges placed upon them. Representative Bruce Williamson, you asked Georgia Power how many charging stations they have throughout the state and if they intend to get into the direct retailing business of rolling out a whole system of charging in the state, or is just this an early adoption process? The announcement of 6 major utilities, frankly speaking, scares us. Earlier this year, the Highway Electric Coalition, made up of an American Electric Power, Dominion Energy, Duke Energy, Entergy Corporation, Southern Company, and the Tennessee Valley Authority, announced a plan to ensure that electric vehicle drivers have access to a seamless network of charging stations in their territories. Currently, the power companies are advertising that they are building their network of community chargers for customers all over the state. And while this sounds good in theory, it guarantees the utilities a monopoly in providing fuel to motorists. If the utility companies are allowed to rate-base infrastructure and provide electricity to themselves, it eliminates competition and disincentivizes the private sector to invest in vehicle charging. As business owners and entrepreneurs, you can understand the hesitation convenience store owners and operators have investing in electric vehicle charging when they can't resell power on a level playing field. As a follow-up, Representative Williamson stated a concern that Georgia Power would end up with an advantage over our traditional energy suppliers. I'm assuming that meant gas stations. Again, thank you for bringing that point. It's one of our gravest concerns, and the reason we feel this bill is necessary. One of my members recently and reluctantly partnered with a power provider in a 10-year contract. The power company paid for the make-ready infrastructure and the charger on my member's property. And I'm assuming rate-based or cross-subsidized this cost. My member neither profits from the charger, nor do they charge the power company any type of rental fee to provide this service to the community. They do, however, get to maintain that parking space, keep a clean parking lot, empty the trash can, keep a clean restroom for the consumer to pay the power company on a time basis to recharge their vehicle. That contract structure is simply unacceptable as this industry evolves. So you may want to ask me, why would anyone enter into that agreement? Which was exactly what I asked my member. What'd you do that for? They felt like number one, the community needed the service. And number two, they didn't have any negotiating power due to the many obstacles that we face in this current environment. And they reluctantly took that on as a loss leader. I'm not sure if Chairman Dickey is online, but I want to thank him for his question to Georgia Power regarding their vision for creating a rate schedule for EV charging. I was glad to hear Georgia Power say that they had heard back from their customers and were looking at better ways to meet those needs. In this bill, we're clearly asking for a rate structure from Georgia Power. As of today, we have three main concerns, along with the resale and the monopoly issue is the rate issue. Power companies, in essence, would be buying their own product, which is why it's important to use the same rates, terms, and conditions. Since power is billed retroactively, owners of chargers would not know whether the rate at which they would charge motorists would be profitable or not. So for this reason, we've asked our utility companies to work with us on a wholesale electric vehicle charging rate, only available for the use of recharging a vehicle battery. Now, I realize the term wholesale rate. Well, last week I was chastised by my utility friends for using the term wholesale rate. So please forgive me my lack of utility lingo, but when I refer to a wholesale rate, I simply mean a rate in which a retail entity could purchase an item or a service and then resell it at retail to the motoring public. So we've asked, I guess, for a business EV rate for vehicle charging. Alabama, a division of the Southern companies, offers a business vehicle charging rate to privately owned entities. Additionally,
We all feel that way.
That was good. That was, let's hope it's not going wrong, right? Additionally, the Tennessee Valley Authority, who also provides power in North Georgia, offers a business electric vehicle charging rate and has done so since 2018. We're not asking for Georgia Power to do anything that their neighboring utility companies have not already done and that they have already done for different types of customers, whether residential or businesses. Chairman Chuck Martin, you asked, are the charging stations that Georgia Power is rolling out included in the rate base? And does that provide Georgia Power a competitive advantage? Absolutely. Gives Georgia Power a monopoly on charging as well as a competitive advantage. That's why we've addressed those in this bill. Representative Frazier also asked about rate basing. You hit the point. My understanding of rate basing is cross-subsidizing expenses, and who's going to be paying for that? So thank you for bringing up such a critical issue. And you had asked about liquid cooling. The information, Representative Williamson, you asked about liquid cooling. There's information in that packet as well from the Ford Media Center. When those chargers become available, it'll be a game changer in the evolution of this industry. And a couple of final things I want you to respond to. Philip Singleton asked about the federal infrastructure funding, $135 million, but we will need to subsidize that by private investors. So should this body choose to ensure a level playing field, we feel the 6,500 stores in Georgia will, over time, be able to meet the needs of motorists in metro and rural areas. And I believe Representative Kennard asked a second question. How would this affect those that would prepay for fueling subscriptions? I don't think there would be any effect because currently, if you stop at a place that doesn't accept that subscription, then you're subject to the fees per minute or per hour. Chairman Parsons asked, Georgia Power, are they convinced the language in House Bill 1133 actually provided for the resale of electricity? While Chairman Choka's bill certainly may do that by referencing existing codes, we feel confident that the language in this bill spells out clearly in section 46(3)(b)(3) on lines 64 through 66 that resale is clear. And we appreciate all the efforts and tremendous hours of research that has been spent on both of those drafts. I may not have been able to answer every question asked yesterday, but I've hopefully been able to provide valuable information. In addition to a verbal testimony, I've provided each of you a packet of information that includes a one-pager on the obstacles of charging, the current convenience store demographics in Georgia, as well as the demographics in your districts, a map of the regulated and unregulated states, a listing of the states that provide by law the resale of kilowatt hours, the White House fact sheet on Biden-Harris Charging Action Plan, an article from the American Electric Power Association outlining the newly formed Electric Highway Coalition in the Southeast, some information on Georgia Power's website, Alabama's business EV charging rate structure, along with the minutes from the Tennessee Valley Authority's 2018 board meeting approving their business EV rate. And if there's anything further I can provide you, I'll be glad to do so. We know this is a complicated issue. We respect that. Our fear is that without legislative change, convenience store retailers won't have the opportunity to continue to do what it is we do best, competitively sell fuel to motorists, and soon that the current business model in which we work will no longer be viable to keep Georgians moving. And we hope that this is also concerning to the legislature, as we are the selling force for the Georgia lottery. We fill in where food deserts are, and in many communities, we're the only location with the lights on 24/7. So I thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it very much. Chairman Martin, you have a question, if you can make it
Very quick.
directly to the bill and.
Yes.
very
To the
concise.
to the lady's reference to my asking of Georgia Power, I did ask that. They did
Yes.
answer. I want to say in their defense, since I was a bit, is it not true, Mr. Chairman, that they have those out there? It is imperative for me to spread on the minutes here. They were directed to do that by the Public Service Commission. And it goes back to the ladies and the gentleman saying of bringing this very bill to give this legislature the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, under your leadership to decide that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the questions I see. Thank you. Last person signed up to speak. However, Terry Lindell, I cut you off previously. Was there something you wanted to say? Well, you were wanting to say something because you came over toward the mic. Okay. She doesn't want to say anything. All right, we're going to hear back from the author of the bill. Chairman Powell.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to have this brief presentation before this goes to subcommittee. I look forward to an active subcommittee meeting on this. I want to thank all the participants that testified, our friends with the utility companies, the folks in the retail business who this means the very point of survival. But remember that this was about being a framework. This is just setting for the future. Before this thing goes so far down the road, it is hard to turn it around. Now, that being said, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Hell, it's 5 o'clock here. It's time for me to get out of here.
Well, let me say this before we conclude here and adjourn. We have two bills before us dealing with the EV charging stations. The one we heard yesterday, the one from Chairman Powell today. I felt like, and I believe that our leadership feels like, that these are issues important enough to give a lot of thought to. And, if we do, we can do nothing. I mean, we don't, nothing, legislation doesn't have to do anything on this, but I think what we're doing, if we don't do anything this year, I'm not saying we have to do it this year, but if we do, we're delaying it for another year. We're delaying doing anything for another year if we don't do it this year, obviously. So, I think it's something that, we know that these are coming on, whether there are 50 EVs out there or what. I mean, the onslaught is coming because we can't do anything about it. The manufacturers, as have been presented to us in testimony, they are changing to EVs. The current administration in Washington very much pro, and I don't see that changing myself. I don't know what I'm not a soothsayer. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I don't see that changing because with the manufacturer of them coming on board and with the fact that we are looking to bring carbon down and everything. I mean, I see that as coming on, whether you like it or not. I mean, I like gasoline engine powered cars. I mean, but you know, one day if I can ever afford one, I'll probably have a something, probably a Nissan Leaf that's been used. It's probably what I'll be end up trying. But I think, you know, it's coming on. And I think that you know, the thought process that we need to get some kind of a framework, and I'm not favoring, you know, either bill here because I don't want to do that. But what I'm going to do is, I know that Chairman Martin is kind of loaded up with his own committee, but also a couple of bills that I put in there. So here's a committee, subcommittee that I want to look at this, and I want this and the other bill. And I want us to try to come back by next week if possible. And I will also say this, I think the Senate may be looking at wanting to do a study committee, and maybe that's what we end up doing. I don't know, some kind of joint study committee. But I do believe that, you know, I've been on study committees. I don't know what we learned between now and December and then come back in January to do it. We've heard testimony from a broad spectrum of people here. You know, we've heard testimony. I don't know, you know, if there's anything else that needs to be said, if somebody else wants to bring something to us, they can bring it to the subcommittee, but we need to look at this. And I don't want to, you know, I don't want to prejudice the subcommittee on what they do. So I'm not going to shut up there, but here is the subcommittee, a special subcommittee that I want your bill and Chocus is put into. And I do want them to look at this seriously. And it would be chaired by Vice Chairman Gullett. It'll have Chairman Martin on it, Victor Anderson, Beth Camp, Katie Dempsey, Gloria Fraser, Kennard, Beth Moore, McLaren, Representative Meeks, Sheila Nelson, Brad Thomas, Bruce Williamson. Did I just read this correctly, what I wrote down? Okay, that'll be Vice Chairman Gullett who will be chairing this thing. I think is he at Georgia Tech? I think he is, isn't he?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, Scooty's a Florida guy.
Okay, well, then maybe I need to reconsider that then. But that's who's going to be the subcommittee chairman. And I am very serious. I want this thing to be, we spent a lot of time on this. Chairman's been here both days on both bills, and y'all from the public have spent a lot of time in here, as have people on the members of the committee. It's an important issue. It's something that needs to be taken very seriously. And I just ask the members of the subcommittee to take it. I know that you will, but to see what we can do and see if we can't move forward with this. And with that, if there's nothing, did I give you the opportunity to speak? I'm sorry.
He's ready to go.
Okay. Very good. Well, with that, we're adjourned.